I want you to think back to your favorite childhood game. What was it? When did you first start playing it? For me, that game was Minecraft. I'm part of the generation where Minecraft is old enough to have been a part of my childhood, and I'm very grateful for that. Minecraft was something that me and my friends could hang out and talk about for hours on end. We loved the game, and we were excited to find out anything and everything about the game. The novelty of it excited us, and we were excited to share anything new we found out about the game with each other whenever we talked about it at school. But then, one day, a trailer appeared on YouTube. Minecraft 2. I hadn't heard about Minecraft 2 before, but if it's the sequel to my favorite game, then I have to watch this trailer. Of course, it was fan-made, but me being a kid, I of course didn't realize that. I watched it and quickly became excited, knowing that one day, there will exist a better version of my favorite game, modernized and made even better than before. Sadly, this didn't end up happening, but the excitement in knowing that a game I love so dearly would have the chance to be improved upon in such a drastic way has still stuck with me until today. And now, with the release of Tower World into the Obbies community, I'm once again getting that same feeling all over again. To me, Tower World is the exact game that the Obbies world needs to be able to progress into the future. But just what exactly is this Tower World I speak of, and why is it so important? Well, let's get into it, shall we? Before we get into the video, there's an important term you should know. Towers. I have a full video made on this topic called The Rise of Modern Roblox Obbies, which talks about what exactly a tower is and how they were created, but I'll quickly summarize what a tower is here anyways. A tower is a stack of 10 floors. A floor is a 100 by 100 by 100 cube that contains an obby inside. This obby can contain anything from regular platforms and jumps to specialized scripted objects called client objects, or COs, that have special properties that are custom coded into the part. And that's actually all you need to know about towers. These things are basically everywhere nowadays, so if you want a good example, you're likely to find some just by looking at the front page of Roblox. Alright, let's get into Tower World. Tower World is a tower-based obby game created by Franco J. Previously, Franco J created the game Void L Towers in 2020 during the height of the tower game craze. This game gathered just over 5 million visits before its eventual shutdown in preparations for its eventual spiritual sequel. After about 3 years of development, Franco J released a teaser trailer to his YouTube channel revealing Tower World to the world of Roblox Obbies. Quickly after, in April of 2024, he released the alpha trailer for the game, revealing its release date of April 26, 2024. Not much happened during this time, but eventually, April 26th came and went, and Tower World was released in its alpha to the public, costing 50 Robux for entry. However, the history isn't the most important part of this game, so I'm going to leave it there. What's really important is the gameplay, and what Tower World brings to the now 6-year-old genre of tower games. Tower World has one major important point that makes it different from other tower games. It breaks the usual formula. This formula, which I will call the Tower Formula, is as follows. Player controls stay as the default. Make gameplay surrounding the default player controls. I'll try and describe this through an example. Think of Tower of Heck, the first game ever created. Now, can you think of any point throughout the tower where they made the player do any sort of movement other than regular walking and jumping and occasionally some climbing? That answer is no. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, just that modern towers are all based on a tower that followed a specific formula. Now, let's switch over to Tower World. In the tutorial, the player is introduced to a new form of movement, wall climbing. Wall climbing, which is being shown in background footage, changes the player movement from 3D movement to only a 2D one, but allows for the player to move to locations that would be otherwise inaccessible in the normal movement mode. On top of this, it allows for an entirely unique set of gameplay challenges to be created revolving around this new movement style. This is how Tower World manages to break the tower formula. It introduces non-default controls and movement types. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's cool and all, but that isn't enough to change all of Roblox Obbies, is it? And the answer to that is, well, it depends on how much you're willing to change the default controls. Let's take a game like Robot 64 for example. It has completely rethought the entirety of Roblox's controls and physics to be more similar to Super Mario 64's gameplay. It has gone so far that it is effectively a standalone game at this point. This is not just a show of what changing Roblox's controls would be like, it is a show of what the Roblox engine can be pushed to if a creator wants to. This type of obby game is what I would call hyper-modern. It is so far different from modern obbies and obby standards that it is now at a completely different level. These types of games go to show just how far Roblox can be changed if someone wants to. However, most tower game players would not want their games to be pushed this far, and I'm inclined to agree. Tower games are a special breed of obby games that are more advanced than classic obbies, such as mega fun obbies, yet not quite as different as hyper-modern ones, such as Robot 64. This is why I call them modern obbies. They are between classic and hyper-modern in terms of advancement. Back to Tower World. There's two more important aspects I want to cover: the shape of the towers, and the client objects that these towers contain. Wacky frames, which are towers that are not in the usual shape of 10 stacked floors, are nothing new. However, they are not nearly as common as you'd expect, for an important reason that we'll cover in the next section. What's different about the wacky frame towers in Tower World is that they are commonplace in this game compared to other tower games. Most towers will only contain normal frames, but in Tower World, all 4 of the currently released towers are wacky frames, if even just to a minimal extent. This is important because it allows for tower creators to have the freedom to make their obbies in any shape they want to, without the constraints of a regularly shaped frame. The second important aspect involves unique COs that would not typically be found in the usual tower. COs that are not part of the typical tower making kit that the majority of builders use is called a custom client object, or CCO for short. Once again, the reason these are not widespread is also for the same reason as to why wacky frames are not common. I will cover this reason in the next section, as I said earlier. CCOs provide virtually infinite creative freedom and can allow for almost any type of gameplay to be created. These can help to completely shape how a tower is played, or, if used more lightly, can be a nice change of pace from the usual tower gameplay. Tower World uses CCOs in every single tower in the game, equipped with not just new gameplay, but special animations as well. They are made specifically to differentiate the game from other tower games, and they do a great job of it. Wall climbing is an example of a CCO in Tower World, and some others include player shrinkers and quicksand. There are, of course, many more CCOs in the game than just these 3, but they all share a common purpose nonetheless: to spice up the gameplay. I mentioned before a reason as to why diversity in towers is limited. Specifically, I use the example of wacky frames and CCOs being quite uncommon to present this reason. Just what exactly was I talking about? Well, here's your answer. Control. Juke's Towers of Hell, the biggest tower game out there of all time, is actually the original tower game ever created. It used to be called Kitty's Towers of Hell, and was once owned by Obbies, the creator of the first ever tower obby in all of Roblox, the Tower of Hell. As I said before, I have a whole video on this topic, so let's just skip right to the important part. As the game started getting traction, it started accepting fan-made towers to be put into the game. This, however, came with 2 issues. How can the owners of a game ensure that 1, the tower would fit properly into the game, and 2, be safe to put into the game? If every submitted tower wasn't wacky framed, how could the creators ensure that it would fit properly into the space constraints of each area in the game? Well, the answer is simple. If every tower is the exact same shape as the Tower of Hell, then it can easily be planned for, thereby preventing the issue before it starts. Thus, JTOH, which is a short version of Juke's Towers of Hell, limited wacky frames to only be built by players with the builder role in their Discord server, who are people who have had a tower pass official review to be put in-game. This greatly limited the amount of wacky frame towers being submitted, thereby curbing the problem of towers not fitting entirely, and if a wacky frame did ever actually pass, as long as there weren't too many of them, the problem could be easily solved. This solves the first issue. However, how did they solve the second issue of towers being possibly unsafe, mainly security-wise, to be put in-game? This was actually solved in a similar way. Tower builders are given an official tower kit to build towers with, and if they didn't use it, your tower was automatically disqualified from review. This made it so that the owners would know exactly how everything in a tower would work, thereby preventing any malicious activity that could come with custom-coded objects. However, CCOs are still allowed in towers, but the only people who are allowed to use them are people with the verified builder role in the Discord server, who are people who are known community-wide as amazing and trustworthy tower builders. In and of itself, this is not a bad thing. GTOH is amazing as is, even without extreme diversity, and further, putting these constraints in place allows for the game to stay running smoothly and be developed easier. Control isn't inherently bad, even if it may seem like it. However, this became problematic due to the nature of the tower obby community. Fan games are a natural and immensely important part of the tower obby community, as they allow the genre to continue thriving and expanding. However, the issue with fan games is that, well, they're fan games. This causes one primary issue. If JTOH puts constraints in place, then the fan games likely will too. This means that fan games are also likely to be similar to GTOH in terms of having very little wacky frames and CCOs. This creates an echo chamber, in which the standards for towers are heavily constrained, and if a game tries to break away from these standards, they won't have any footsteps to follow in, as they would be some of the first people to try and create something completely different. As such, diversity has plateaued. No one is trying to break away from the tower formula, and if anyone tries to, failure is very likely, as they do not have any good examples to follow. And this is why Tower World is so important. It's a glimmer of hope that we can go beyond the supposed top that we have been at for so long now. With all that explained, we can now see why Tower World's normalizing of wacky frames and CCOs is so important. It breaks the two rules set in place by JTOH to such an extent that they are now ingrained into the game itself. Without rules, control cannot exist, and without control, creativity cannot be bound or constrained by anything. The Tower Obby community has been following this formula for so long now that tradition has taken a strong grasp over the creativity that tower creators will allow themselves to express. But now that a tower game that is willing to unbind its own creativity has released and become more popular, I hope that this can be a starting point for others to follow in its footsteps. But this is only one part of the equation. Tower World doesn't have any footsteps to follow in itself, so how can we be so sure it will be successful? Well, this is why Franco J being the owner and creator of this game is so important. Franco J, as I mentioned, has experience in creating successful games. He created Void L Towers, which, as I mentioned, reached about 5 million visits before its shutdown. This proves that he has the experience to create a game that has potential at being successful, and with a strong team of developers following closely behind, I have no doubts they will be able to run Tower World the way it should be. Tradition. Comforting, yet not something we should settle for. It's hard to like change, and how can anyone be blamed for that? If humans find comfort in something, why change it? Well, imagine you're playing your favorite childhood video game. You enjoy playing it, and you are happy. But then, one day, you see that a sequel for it is being made. There's no doubt that the sequel will be better, and yet, you can't shake off the feeling that it will replace your current game. You know for sure that the sequel will be better, and yet, why are you so reluctant to move on to it from the old one? Uncertainty that the future will be better is hard to overcome. It's hard to move on from something, even if a new thing is better in the end. And that's alright, but never forget that we are always moving forward. The future will come, no matter how much we hope otherwise. The future is nothing to hide from. Even if it seems scary, there's always hope that it can be better than the present. And that hope cannot be fulfilled if we hide from it and don't work towards it. If there's one thing for you to take away from this video, it's this. Don't hide from the future. I want you to remember that there is always a glimmer of hope that things can be better, even if it seems small, and that hiding will only diminish that glimmer. Uniqueness and creativity are what drive this world forward. So remember, be unique, be brave, be you. Thanks for watching. I recently made a video on my main channel, HQC_plays, about Tower World, and I've been enamored by it ever since. It's just such a nice switch up from the usual tower games that I felt I had to make a video essay on it. I know I talked like JTOH is some sort of tyrant with a vice grip on the entire tower community, but I do want you to know that this simply isn't true. I'm a story writer, so I just enjoyed making up a hero and villain dynamic between JTOH and Tower World. But in the end, I love JTOH just as much as any other tower hobbyist does. But that doesn't stop me from hoping for greater and greater games. If you do want to give Tower World a try for yourself, I can easily recommend the game to just about anyone who can afford it. Even if you don't like it in the end, it's worth a shot. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like the video and subscribe to the channel. I make all sorts of video essays on just about any game I feel like. So who knows? Maybe you'll find a new favorite game when I make a video on something new. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.